Today is the anniversary of the horrific Texas winter storm, Winter Storm Yuri. 3 years ago today, over 10 million Texans needlessly lost power. Hundreds of people died, and there were these mass power outages that we all knew could have been avoided. I asked some of my constituents to share their memories and their stories of that day, and we had tons of those stories just pouring in. And so I want to share a few of them. Jessica from South Austin said, "It was utter despair. We were so cold that we pulled the cabinets down off of the walls to burn in our home and in our fireplace to keep us alive." From Jill in San Antonio, "It was so cold in the house that we couldn't move and our animals even couldn't move." From Linda in San Marcos, "We had dinner in 4 layers of clothes by candlelight with only our emergency wind-up radio left to survive." From July in Austin, "That morning the heat ran out and instantly the temperature in our trailer dropped to 30 degrees. It was scary because we're in our 70s and diabetic. I was concerned about hypothermia, and the worst part of it was the sense of being abandoned by our government." During the crisis, hundreds of people died, and many more would have died if the community hadn't sprung into action to take care of one another. People became grid experts overnight. They were powering people's breathing machines by hooking them up to their gas-powered trucks. I, as an elected official, was spending time trudging through the snow, helping deliver blankets to people to keep them warm. We were working with our public transportation to get seniors from their homes to high school gyms to make sure that they didn't die of hypothermia. And it was actually when I was trudging through the snow one night that we got the news that Governor Abbott was going on national television to talk about the storm. And he went on Fox News to blame wind turbines for the grid's collapse. At the same time, we were getting the news about Senator Ted Cruz going on a trip to Cancun instead of standing up for his constituents. Instead of officials like Ted Cruz running away from this problem, it's time for elected leaders to present Texans with a real solution. Instead of people like Governor Greg Abbott, who are collecting million-dollar checks from corporate contributors who made billions of dollars off the storm, it's time for leaders from across the country to bring real solutions to the table, and that's what we're here doing today. So, although it's the 3rd anniversary of Winter Storm Yuri, it's also Valentine's Day, and it's time for us to break up with blackouts. We know that we could have kept millions of people out of these mass power outages if we connect the Texas grid to the rest of the country. Whether you're in the middle of a heat wave or a winter storm, every single American should be able to keep the lights on. If Texas is in trouble and we connect to the grid, we'll make sure that Texas can draw power from other states. And when other states are in trouble, whether you're in Louisiana or New Mexico or Oklahoma, and you are in trouble, then Texas Wind and Texas Solar should also be able to go and help you out. It's called supporting one another. It's something we believe in Texas, and it's something we believe in the United States of America. So with the Connect to the Grid Act that we've filed today, we know that we can prevent blackouts, save billions of dollars, and fight the climate crisis across this country. So this is what the bill does. It's very simple. It would require interconnection between ERCOT, Texas's power grid, and its neighbors. The bill requires between about a dozen or 3 dozen gigawatts of transfer capacity, and the Department of Energy has identified in a transmission needs study in 2023 that this is what would really be required if we want to prevent blackouts and reduce the enormous cost to consumers of natural disasters. It also would bring ERCOT under the purview of FERC, which would make sure that consumers aren't getting screwed and that rates are just and reasonable in Texas and beyond. We already know this works because 3 years ago, during the winter storm, El Paso on the western edge of Texas and Beaumont on the eastern edge of Texas are actually already interconnected. 90% of Texans are on ERCOT, isolated from the rest of the country, but in communities like El Paso and Beaumont that were interconnected, they did not have those mass power outages. So it makes so much sense for us to finally connect the grid and bring power to the people and stop caving in to these massive political and economic interests that benefit from keeping us separated. This also would save us money. Texans are paying for their isolated grid, literally. Under normal conditions, connecting our grids would save Texans about $4 billion over the next dozen years. But if there are extreme weather events, you think there's going to be extreme weather events? There probably will be. In the case of extreme weather events, it will cost us $20 billion if we do not connect our grids. In the 2019 heat wave, a recent study showed that connecting the grid would have saved us hundreds of millions of dollars in that one heat wave alone. So it's common sense for consumers in Texas, but this is also common sense for consumers all across the country. Because whether you're in Louisiana or Oklahoma or New Mexico or Nevada, if you have a natural disaster, but the sun is shining in Texas and the wind is blowing in Texas, we can provide that lower cost power to you as well. We're interconnected as Americans, and that's why we need to connect the grid. And one of the last, but probably the most important reason for connecting the grid is to protect people in our current climate crisis and to tackle the climate crisis so it doesn't get worse. The United States cannot beat back the climate crisis without Texas. Texas is the largest producer of clean energy in the United States. We are the energy capital of the country and of the world. We cannot solve the global challenge of the climate crisis without connecting ourselves to the rest of the country. Connecting the grid would drastically reduce carbon dioxide emissions by making sure that some of the sunniest and windiest parts of this entire country can actually provide clean energy across the United States and not just be isolated to Texas. So this Valentine's Day, it's time to form a real connection and connect the grid.